Michael, I just outlined how Joe Robbie was maybe similar to other team owners, but how was he unique?
Well, first of all, I mean, he put down $100,000 and ended up owning an entire NFL team, which,
Wow.
that's sort of like buying Coca-Cola stock, I guess, in 1898 or whatever it would have been. Really just a brilliant, brilliant businessman, did things his way, had an enormous appetite for risk, really not a wealthy man outside of the football team, and wildly successful. And he was strange because he was really not liked in Miami at the time because of his uh, attitude, I guess, his personality. But I mean, the Dolphins far and away had their greatest success when he was the owner.
Michael, explain to us how Joe Robbie's strategy of owning an NFL stadium, how risky was his plan back in the day?
Well, it kind of sounds simple now, but at the time in the mid 80s, I mean, stadiums were just where teams played. You rented a stadium from your city, you had a place to play, you tried to get a favorable lease, and that was it. He built a stadium by himself with no public funding, which is basically unprecedented. He came up with and developed club seats as a concept. He had 10-year leases on those. He used the lure of hosting a Super Bowl in the future to help sell the club seats. I mean, there were so many things he did that were really kind of set the stage for the last 30 years of stadium building in this country.
Now, Joe Robbie had a big family. He had 11 children. He passed away, though, before he was able to really pass the team down to his family. Revisionist history, how might the future have changed if Joe Robbie never got sick?
Well, I think his family would still own the team if he lived another 10 years. I think he would have figured that out. I mean, he died at the time when the risk was so great that they really had to kind of band together and figure out how to pay estate taxes, how to keep the team in the family, and the family really blew apart in a really sad way, which is detailed in the story. So it's strange. It's like his greatest achievement was Joe Robbie Stadium, and yet that's also what ended up costing his family ownership of the Dolphins.
Many of Joe's family, Michael, they believe that the ambition of owning that NFL stadium ultimately tore the family apart. So, in your opinion, should Joe Robbie's story be considered a success or a failure?
Well, it's complicated. I mean, I think the family was probably had the potential to fall apart, and that's what did it. And he had no way of knowing that was going to be what did it. And he was a complicated guy, cared intensely about his family, but his family obviously had a lot of issues, as I detailed in the story. A brilliant businessman with an enormous appetite for risk, and the stadium was a success, but that appetite for risk ended up catching up with him and his family. So it's complicated. I don't think any of the kids would blame him for anything, but certainly it didn't turn out as he had hoped it would.
And of course, they lost the team, had to sell it off to Wayne Huizenga, who then sold it off to Stephen Ross, who owns the Dolphins today. If there's an owner in the NFL today, Michael, that you believe resembles the characteristics of Joe Robbie, who is that? Who is that owner?
Well, there's no one quite like him. I mean, I guess you could look at like the Rooneys or something in Pittsburgh because they've owned the team and that's been their family business. But to me, I would go with Jerry Jones of the Cowboys. He built that stadium in Dallas, spent way more of his own money than anybody thought was logical because he felt like, look, with HDTV, with all the different entertainment options out there, with as enjoyable as it is to watch football on TV, I need to make the stadium itself a spectacle, which is a different kind of new idea than what Joe Robbie had, but for its time, I think made sense. Jones certainly enjoys a drink, as Joe Robbie did. Enormous appetite for risk. He's certainly more liked by the media, but I guess I would say, in personality-wise, he might be the most similar, kind of a maverick.